I have a strawberry rhubarb candle burning and it smells so good. Hi friends, I'm Felicia. Welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be doing my April wrap up, even though May's almost over. I'm just so super timely. It's just so out of the booktube habit, but you forgive me, right? Because you like me for who I am. So I read quite a few books in April and I'll just get into it. I did talk about Breaking Dawn and The Coldest Girl in Cold Town in my last video, but I did actually read them in April. Or just finished them in April, so I thought I would mention that even though I already talked about them. So then the first book that I want to talk about is The Midnight Star by Marie Lu, and that is the third book in the Young Elite series. It's not my favorite series, but I decided just to finish it because I'm a completionist, I guess. Unless I really hate it, I'm not, or like super bored, then I'm not going to finish it, but I did find it interesting. If you don't know the premise of the series, it's a fantasy series, and the main character, Adelina, she is actually kind of like an anti-hero, or she's often the villain in the story. And so I found that really interesting because you don't see that a lot in young adult, that the main character point of view is from the bad guy. And so I wanted to see where Marie Lu would take that in the last book, if the story arc would continue on that, or if she would bring it about. And I think the last book was my favorite book in the series. I think that she did the story justice, and I think that she brought it to a good end. Yeah, so I did like, I'm glad that I finished the series. I thought it came to a good conclusion. And if you're interested in reading it, I would recommend it. I mean, it's not the best, but it's not bad either, so yeah. And the next book that I read was The Golem and the Jinni by Helene Wecker, and I listened to that on audio, and it's narrated by George Guidall, I think is how you say it. And I really enjoyed his narration. I thought it added a lot to the story. It's also fantasy. I guess urban fantasy. It's set in the early 1900s in New York, and it follows a golem whose master has died, and so she has to navigate New York and life without a master. If you're not familiar with what a golem is, it's from Jewish folklore, and it's a creature usually made out of clay, and they are bound to a master, and they have to serve their master. And so that is the golem. And and then the genie has been trapped in what was it, a jar or a pot or something, or a bottle, and he is set free by a metalsmith working in New York, and he lives in the Syrian quarter. And so it's very interesting because it follows these two different, it follows the Jewish community and it follows the Syrian community, and I actually don't think there are any like white Caucasian European characters in this book at all. So I found that really interesting. I really like that, just that diversity in there of something different from what I usually read. And I really liked the book. It was just beautifully told. The writing was just beautiful, and I found the characters very compelling, and where the story went, it was just all very interesting. Yeah, I was just fascinated the whole time. I really enjoyed it, and I think there's supposed to be a second book coming out next year maybe, so I'll definitely be picking that up if it does come out. My tea is cold, and I can't warm it up because it has gold. Gold around the rim, so I don't want to put it in the microwave. By the way, this is coffee cake black tea from David's Tea, and it's wonderful. This is my first time having it, and I really like it. The next book that I read was The Jewel by Amy Ewing, and that's the first book in her Lone City series. I have read it before. I've read the first and second books, and the last book came out a few months ago, and I finally was able to get it on overdrive on audio, and so I decided I would just listen to the series again because I didn't remember a lot from the first book, and the second book definitely not. I think I zoned out for most of that book or something. Like I had no nothing retained from the second book. So yeah, I listened to The Jewel on audio, and that's the whole series is narrated by Erin Spencer. Her narration isn't my favorite, but it was fine for the book. The Lone City series is kind of a young adult take on The Handmaid's Tale, in the sense that our main character is a surrogate who has been taken from her home, where this certain area, she comes from the marsh, and girls that come from the marsh are compatible to be a surrogate or something. Then they get taken to be surrogates for the royalty in The Jewel, and so that's where our main character is. And it seems like I guess, dystopian fantasy, but there are actually a lot more fantasy elements as the series goes on. I like the way that the series is broken up. There's a lot of things that happen in each book. Yeah, I think the first book is a solid start to the series. Yeah, I recommend it for people that like dystopian and that like fantasy. The next book that I read was a graphic novel that I got as an ARC from NetGalley, and that is Mare by Joelle Selner. It's basically, I think, a standalone graphic novel, and it is about mer people. And so, yeah, it's a pretty typical story. Nothing new in it, and I didn't particularly love the art style. It was fine, but it wasn't anything amazing. It was just kind of generic. Yeah, actually I would say that the whole book just felt kind of generic to me. There was nothing special about it. I wouldn't particularly recommend it. Unless you're like me and you're just a sucker for anything that says mermaid or Atlantis or anything like that on it, then, pick it up if you want. But I wouldn't go out and buy it for sure. Yeah, it was just okay. And now I have a book to actually show you. I read An Abundance of Katherines by John Green, and I read this for for Dewey's 24-hour readathon. I finished this book that day. Started and finished, so I felt pretty good about that. This is a young adult contemporary, and it follows our main character, Colin. Yeah, his name is Colin. And he has just graduated from school, and he's feeling like he doesn't know what to do with his life. And he always dates girls named Catherine, and it has to be Catherine with a K. And I first of all find it amazing that there would be that many girls named Catherine, his age, that he could date, but whatever. And so he only dates girls named Catherine, and his latest Catherine the 19th, has dumped him, and so he's feeling a little lost, and so his best friend convinces him to go on a road trip, and then they end up in an interesting small town, and they end up kind of staying there for the summer, and yeah, so it just follows that. I know some people that think John Green's characters are really pretentious. I love that his characters are pretentious, because that was me as a teenager. Like, I totally thought I was cool like that. So I just see so much of myself in these characters, and I don't even know when this book was published. This book was published in 2006. I could have still read this when I was a teenager, and I wish that I had, because it just would have been so good for me. I would have loved it so much, even more. But I did really enjoy it. I just love John Green, so I liked it. And, like, can these just die? This is actually printed on. Ugh. And then I read one more book for Dewey's 24-hour readathon, and that was Fruits Basket Volume 13, and it was okay. It was better than the previous volume. So, yeah. That's about it. That's all I have to say about that. All those books just don't really distinguish themselves from each other for me. And I say that every time. But yeah, so I read Volume 13. So I'm like halfway through. So that's all the books that I read in April. If you have read any of these books, let me know your thoughts on them. And if you have decided to pick up any of these books because I talked about them, then let me know that as well. I hope that you are having a wonderful day, and until next time, so long and thanks for all the fish.